Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to another episode of Field Notes, the weekly podcast from the Hindu Business Line on all things agribusiness. I'm your host, TR Vivek. On today's show, we will be talking to Anil Kumar SG, the founder and CEO of Samunnati, an agri-tech startup that many consider might become one of India's first unicorns in this sector. Samunnati is headquartered in Chennai and is primarily in the business of lending to small farmers. It calls itself a farm ecosystem enabler by helping farmers aggregate their produce, provide market linkages, and advisory services. A couple of months ago, Samunnati's lending to farmers and other related operators crossed the $1 billion mark. However, despite all the buzz about agri-tech startups in India, are farmers really benefiting? Anil Kumar might be the good person to ask this question. Anil is a career banker with over 28 years of experience in areas of rural, retail, and agri banking. He started his career with Canara Bank and then joined ICICI Bank. Over the last decade, Anil's work has focused on creating new institutions across the country and operating in the sort of financially excluded markets with support structures for capacity building. Hello, Anil, and welcome to Field Notes.
Right. Hello, Vivek. It's wonderful to be on this program and be able to share some of my own journey in the agriculture space. Thanks for having me here.
Great. Anil, during my conversations with investors in the agri space, almost all of them named Samunnati among their bets to be the first agri-tech unicorn. How close are you to being one today?
I really don't know. And fortunately or unfortunately, Vivek, nobody told me that so far. Mm-hmm. In fact, I was a little taken aback when you mentioned about that name. Mm-hmm. But having said that, what I would be most happy about and be enthused about is if Samunnati can be a unicorn in the number of farmers that we have touched upon rather than from a valuation perspective. Valuation is an outcome of a work, but what excites us, what keeps us going, and the purpose of our existence is how can we make markets work for smallholder farmers. And if Samunnati, I would not say if, when Samunnati reaches $1 billion mark in terms of $1 billion number in terms of number of farmers that we have reached out to, is when we have done something meaningful. I would say it is still 1/10 of what the whole population is in the world.
Yeah, but sadly we may not have as many farmers for you to reach that number.
World, I would say, right? Okay. Or families. What we are also enthused about is the journey that started in 2014 has led us to start at least $1 billion mark in terms of the throughput that Samunnati has been able to push through the pipe. We have both the agri-finance and agri-commerce. And when we started this journey, it didn't feel as buoyant and enthusiastic as a sector as it is now. There was this standard structure that people were saying that, hey, you lend for a farmer and then there will be a rainfall failure and they will have to go and borrow from informal sources, over indebtedness. Unfortunately, couple of them may take extreme step and then your business is doomed, because we were looking at lending for agriculture at that point in time. It took about 4 or 5 months for us to explain to them that agriculture is not crop loan. Agriculture, a lot happens in agriculture prior to sowing the seed and a lot happens after the seed is harvested. So agriculture is a sector and it is not accidental that 50% of the population of this country is directly, indirectly linked to agriculture. And we started chipping the block from the fringes of saying agriculture is much beyond crop loan. To fast forward, 2021, 2020 pandemic times, people have started realizing the importance of agriculture. And this is one of the sectors that has received significant tailwinds, as the expression goes. Happy for agriculture, happy for the farmers, and most importantly, happy to note that people have started paying attention to this important thing.
Does it always take a crisis for agriculture to merit any attention?
For that matter, anything else. I would say adversity brings people together, is what I was taught in my school. The last school that I attended, Asian Institute of Management. That's the only college I went for that matter. It does bring people more from a solution perspective, more from solving the problem collectively. or again, as the saying goes, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Once you put light on the problem, there will be some solutions coming in, Vivek.
Anil, what indeed is Samunnati today? Is it a lender to farmers? What do you mean when you say enablers of the farm ecosystem?
So the journey started from the debit credit space, Vivek. And then we realized after a year and a half of lending to agriculture, that lending or financial services is one part of a lot that happens. It is important, but not sufficient. And a lot of farmers and farmer collectives, we engage farmers through the farmer collectives, the FPOs. They started saying that, hey, why don't you bring us market linkages? They are more important than financial services. If you look at the post harvest and other requirements, that's what led to Samunnati getting into Samunnati Agro, which is a agri-commerce company which does the market linkages. Since we work a lot with farmer collectives, we had the option of working with a handful of matured entities or working with a large number of small and regional players, which require a lot of institution building as well as support structure. So we felt working in this large space is better, so that we can grow together, and which is what Samunnati is all about. So we have grown this idea organically. Vivek started our journey in one dimension, then added another dimension, and then we are expanding together with our collaboration with a large number of agri-tech and agri-startup entities in the space. Coming from the dimension that there is a lot that needs to be done, the best way to do is in a collaborative manner.
What do you mean?
What has remained constant, though, is why we exist as an organization. We exist to make markets work for smallholder farmers. So the FPOs and their members is the reason why we exist as an organization. Rest all are means. Yes.
What do you mean when you say market linkages? Could you explain what is that and what do you do in terms of linking?
So there are two dimensions of market linkages, or market access, that the farmers look at from the activity called farming perspective. One, how do they buy what they buy, the inputs and other requirements. How do they sell what they have produced, the output requirement. If you take an individual farmer, that individual farmer has access to the retail most part of the input value chain and the first step in the output value chain, right? So, I heard in one such event that farming and farmer is the only activity where you buy retail and sell wholesale. That's exactly what happens when you go to the retail most part of the input value chain. All the other layers would have added their cost, and then what the farmer buys in the little quantities is what they will have to pay. Can we aggregate the demand through their collectivization, through aggregation? That is what our AMLA approach is: aggregation, market linkage, and advisory services. Can we make these 500 farmers come together, these 100 farmers come together as their collective, and then place an aggregated demand? The moment you aggregate the demand, you need not necessarily go to the retail most part of it. You may go to the next wholesaler or a large dealer. And in some cases,
this you're talking of the input side, right?
Input side.
Anil, just a small request. Field Notes is a show addressed at people like me who have very little idea of agriculture. So, please feel free to illustrate what you are saying, or meaning what does input mean? A lot of people may be interested in knowing what we commonly use, these trade jargons.
Sure. Thank you for that. So Vivek, whenever a farmer is looking at buying their seeds, for example, or their pesticides, crop protection chemicals, or equipment, so they will have to go to the local seed shop or a fertilizer pesticide shop, and then buy whatever little quantity that they would like to use for their field. As against that, aggregate the demand as a farmer collective, because you are coming together, and instead of placing, say, if it is a crop protection chemical bottle that you are looking at buying, 100 people would require one bottle each, means 100 bottles. So for those 100 bottles, you may want to actually be required to go to a wholesaler And if this 100 becomes 100,000, then you may actually want to go to the manufacturer of that.
Mhm.
And in order to reach out to these other players in the value chain like wholesalers and manufacturers, a farmer on his own would not be able to do, because they don't have the working capital to place the order for those large quantities, or two, the retail shop of an input seller knows me as an individual farmer, and at times I may also get credit from that shop.
Mhm.
The moment you aggregate, those things would disappear. So our realization was, with working capital backing it, a market linkages where you aggregate the demand for what you buy as inputs for your farming, whether it is seeds or fertilizers or chemicals or crop protection or what have you. Then two things would happen. One, you would be able to access quality inputs. Two, your cost of accessing also would come down because there is an aggregated demand.
Mhm.
Now, on the sale part of it, there are two dimensions. One, the smallholder farmer, after harvesting, say, for example, maize, will be required immediately to sell. And two things would become important for maize. One is the moisture content, how much of moisture is in the grain. And if the grain is fresh, that is not a problem. But if the grain has the moisture and you pack it, it develops a fungus. It's called aflatoxin. These two determine the quality of maize, whether you'd be able to sell or not. If yes, what is the price, and so on and so forth. So usually it is dried in the open for the moisture to come down. So a smallholder farmer would find it difficult to aggregate that little produce, then take a truck and then go and store it in a nearby warehouse and things like that. So their preference would be, I will go to a nearest aggregator, whoever is that aggregator, whether it could be their own collective or a local wholesaler, an Adatya as they're called. Sell the produce, take the money, come back, and then invest it in the next crop. Or if they have already borrowed money against the produce, then it gets deducted at source there, and then rest of it gets paid back. What happens in a environment where there are market linkages in post harvest is where the collective, the FPO, would require a small working capital for say 8 to 10 days at the most, so that whenever a farmer comes to their doorstep to sell, they don't need to wait. The FPO pays the money immediately to the farmer, and farmer goes back, so that the life of the farmer does not change whether he's selling to an Adatya or he's selling to his own FPO. Mm-hmm. In these 8 to 10 days, the FPOs would be able to put together a truckload of that, transfer that into trucks, and most of the corporates who are procuring from the farmers pay to the FPO as soon as the truck leaves the farm gate, actually. But even there, though the corporate says I'm paying immediately upon the truck leaving, the farmer producer organization would require 8 to 10 days of working capital, and having that would make the market linkages happen. So when we as Sammunnati talk about market linkages, we are talking of these kind of structures, Vivek.
Mm-hmm. Anil, there seems to be a lot of new players coming into the market. I oftentimes wonder if there is enough juice in this market. Recently Amazon seems to be keen to enter the Indian farming market, both from the input side. They want to sell inputs like fertilizers and seeds to the Indian farmer, and also aggregate the kind of stuff that you described, the post-harvest produce. Why do you think it is attracting the attention of behemoths like Amazon, who I wouldn't naturally associate with farming?
Right. I guess 2-3 dimensions, Vivek. Number one, there is certainly a huge opportunity that people have realized in putting technology to use in order to bring in market efficiencies between buyers and sellers. Mm-hmm. Number one. Number two, thanks to pandemic, people also have become a little more interested to know not just what they are eating, but how is it produced, where is it produced, and who is producing it. And that seems to be one of the opportunities that is beckoning the agriculture. Mm-hmm. If I can just take a step back, this is a framework that I stumbled upon while having a webinar on agriculture. and I would like to share that with you. We all know the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You have 5 needs. The psychological needs, the safety needs, then needs of belonging, the self-actualization, and egocentric and self-actualization. Putting the same framework in the context of agriculture, first step is access to financial services, access to credit, so to say, to the farmer. Second is customized credit. Is this credit customized to my cash flows? Third is add market linkages to that. 4, add advisory services to, how do I produce, what do I produce, to whom I sell. The 5th one is protective layer around what happens if this activity fails. Is there a safety net in terms of guarantees and insurance? Now, depending on where you enter this, this pyramid determines where one starts engaging with the farmer. So far, as a as a intervention, not necessarily whether as government or as private sector or as institution, all of us have been looking at entering it from a social and societal perspective of let farmer get cheaper credit, freer credit, and schemes and subsidies, all of that, from the dimension of the paternalistic societal dimension. The peak of this pyramid is where you have customized financial services backed by market linkages, advisory services, and safety net. And markets, if they have to make markets work for the smallholder farmers, are best positioned to enter from the topmost, where you need to be an integrated player, bringing in all these 5 services, and then work towards making the farmer the beneficiary of these interventions. Technology plus the flow of private capital into the agtech space, with the entrepreneurs coming in and solving one of these 5 elements or one problem in these 5 elements, is making this market a little vibrant, and that is what is creating a lot of excitement, is my understanding. Because there is an ability to get satellite images, there is an ability to use a spectrometer for quality testing, there is an ability to provide information for some of the insurance products that can be structured. Then there is an ability to capture and digitize the farmer records, so on and so forth. There is an ability to remotely monitor a input shop should one shop come up in the place. Plus the smartphone and other apps that are showing how large number of people can be reached out using technology. And this indeed is a huge unmet demand. And the market is pretty virgin from that perspective for many of these technologies to add value. This is my hypothesis. Maybe right, maybe wrong, I don't know. But
that brings to mind 2 questions. One is that how difficult it is to make farmers pay. Already we talk about farmer distress. How are all these things, satellite imagery or spectrometers, who is going to pay for this? Ultimately, is it me, the consumer? And does that mean that I am not paying the real price for the food that I consume? How will these things be monetized, or will it be the farmer? After a few years, all these high-tech companies will tell farmers, now boss, it is time for you to pay for these services. Is that going to happen? And B, is all of this making any difference to the farmer's life at all?
2 dimensions, Vivek. One, the first part of your question, who will pay for these services, or more importantly, whether farmer pays for these services or not. Wonderful question. Thank you for asking that. Any service where the farmer does not see a tangible benefit here and now in terms of more cash in the pocket, they would not pay for those services. The standard example that we can look at is there are 2 AIs. One is artificial insemination. Second one is artificial intelligence. Artificial insemination makes the cow that the farmer has pregnant, then it gives calf, and then the cow starts giving milk. Selling the milk puts some money into the farmer's pocket, and hence the farmers are ready to pay that 150 rupees for a shot of the artificial insemination to impregnate the cow. And the paravet who does that is taken care of so that process happens without failure. The moment we say artificial intelligence, I will tell you the NPK in your soil, and then the moisture, and then all of that, and you do all of this, eventually your yield will go up by 6%, 10%, and then the difference in the 6% and 10% is the benefit that you have eventually. But pay me now, the farmer does not pay. So my understanding of having spent close to 22 years with the farmers and agriculture space in my 30 years of banking is tangible benefit, farmer pays cash. Intangible benefit, farmer does not pay cash immediately. Hence the second question, then who will pay? Now, who is getting benefited out of it? Let us look at that first, right? If, for example, the risk associated with farming as an activity comes down, who is the beneficiary of it? In my view, the lenders are beneficiaries of it. Because the ability of the farmer to pay is directly proportional to the outcome of the activity that the farmer has invested in, right? By reducing the risk, can we look at paying for that service? Because in a way, my portfolio is getting protected on account of reduction in the risk of the activity. Satellite imagery, for example. Why do you require satellite imagery? From a lender's perspective, you require it for two reasons. One, end use of money. Has the money gone into farming or has it gone somewhere else? Because your ability to see whether the crop is standing gives you the comfort that no, the money that the person has borrowed has indeed gone to the farming. It has not gone somewhere, and hence there is a probability of that farming yielding income and then the crop being harvested and money being paid back. The second one is, how good is that crop? Is it going to yield the expected income or does it require attention? Both these, again, monitoring and end use, which in a way is risk mitigation and moral hazard dimensions, have to be taken care of by the market players. Now, the lack of data is where most of the insurance companies find it difficult to reach out to the smallholder farmers in terms of the insurance products. Penetration of insurance is abysmally low in rural areas, especially farming and other sectors. By creating data, can we then customize products and increase the proliferation of insurance? Increased proliferation of insurance, too, it will increase the coverage of insured population. Second, it diversifies the risk. Who are the beneficiaries? The corporates who are providing the insurance companies are the beneficiaries. So in my understanding, Vivek, such services where the beneficiaries are the larger market players are the sectors, but the farmer is important from the adoption perspective. The cost of this has to be borne by a set of these players, not necessarily one player, and not expect the farmer to pay for it.
Okay, so then how do the corporates or the bank, which is paying for these services, how do they pass it on to the customer? It should be the end user, right? So they will pass it on to me as the consumer of food?
No, two dimensions. They need not pass on to the consumer. There is a cost, right? Say if a bank has lent 100 rupees to agriculture, there is a delinquency percentage. Say, assuming it is 2%, I'm just arbitrarily putting that number. On account of this monitoring, this 2% becomes 1.5%. And if that 0.5% is going to pay for this service, you are still good enough, right? Or by having this monetary mechanism, your ability to take this 100 to 1,000 happens. Now you have a portfolio which is now 1,000, and your ability to earn even at 2% is on a larger pie, and hence your income is going up. For that, if there is an expenditure, why not? It need not necessarily be linearly passed on to the two players in the value chain, which is consumer and producer. It can definitely be absorbed. Most critical one is, can we make the activity operate at a higher equilibrium? Can we increase the throughput in the activity? The moment that happens, the benefits would get accrued on both sides.
I asked this because Indian politics and policy making is extremely sensitive to consumer price, because the prices of any commodity or, onion, oil, dal, anything goes up, politicians get jittery. And, there is a lot of knee-jerkism that happens to prevent consumer prices from shooting up, even if it as the cost of shortchanging the farmer.
Correct. But we have to look at what are the causal factors, Vivek, for that to happen. The devil is always in the detail. It could be on account of improper planning of cropping. It could be on account of wastage that happens in between. It could be on account of inefficient way of handling logistics. It could be on account of lack of processing capability at the farm gate, which can increase the shelf life. There are multiple reasons where you can address the issue of not passing on the increased cost to the consumer, at the same time not charging the producer for it. And I intuitively feel there is a lot that is happening in this space with quality testing and the gap practices and so on and so forth. Technology would pave way for it is my belief.
Mhm. How back to one of my questions, how are then the farmers benefiting? Are they really benefiting? Say, for instance, let us take the question of agri credit itself. Why is there a need for, say, a Samunnati in the first place, considering India has a vast network of PSU banks which may have greater relationships with the farmers themselves than a new kid on the block? So, how are they benefiting, and what is the need for these new companies?
Right. Two dimensions there again. One, how are they benefiting? At this point in time, it is difficult to quantify the benefit, but it certainly has gained a lot of traction and understanding, so that the flow of credit vis-a-vis what it was about 4 years ago has been different, Vivek. Now, an entity in agriculture saying that I am lending to farmers and I am lending to farmer collectives, or an entity that says I am developing this app for farmers, they are not brushed off as some crazy idea. People are at least listening, and it doesn't sound to be a crazy idea. Two, agriculture requires a lot of domain understanding. See, unlike other sectors where you can understand the sector reading the reports and running some heuristics and statistics, agriculture, in addition to being seasonal and cyclical, is also geographical. The same maize crop behaves differently in two different geographies. So one has to invest in domain expertise. Entities that do many things and agriculture find it difficult to focus exclusively on a sector which requires too much of an attention. And some attempts have been made by banks by coming out with dedicated resources called agri extension officer or rural development officer. But then that officer is there for a brief while, and then he is absorbed into the general mainstream as this person progresses in the career, and then a new person comes in. The rural branches, all the rural branches, because I come from Canara Bank. I started my career in a rural branch of Canara Bank. We have something called a non-public business working day, NPBWD. It is usually in the middle of the week, either a Wednesday or a Thursday. And what we are supposed to do is that day, customer transactions don't happen. We are supposed to go to the villages, interact with the villages, and understand what are their regional and local requirements, come back and be able to structure solutions there. While structurally all this sound good, how much of it gets implemented and how much of it gets done at scale, the scale at which the banks operate is difficult. So hence, smaller players like Samunnati find it relatively more easier, because we don't do anything other than agriculture. We do only agriculture. This is our karma bhumi. We do this completely. So we have to invest in domain expertise. We have people from procurement side. Most of our recruitment happens from the management institutes that are specialized in agriculture. We have people from exchange background. We have people from procurement background, in addition to the debit credit people like me, the bankers. That focus is difficult if the entity does many other things and agriculture as well. The green shoots that we are seeing in the last 1.5, 2 years is a lot of these large institutions, DFIs, large NBFCs, as well as banks are looking at co-lending structures through specialized entities like ourselves. And you are also seeing multiple lenders coming into the agriculture, which was not the case when we started. We were maybe the only one. Ananya was there before us. Now there are a host of entities which are into lending in agriculture, and that crop will only go up.
Anil, give us a sense of the lending market and the farmer behavior when it comes to accessing loans and repaying them. What has been your experience of the $1 billion credit that you may have advanced? How much of it goes to the small farmers, and how and where typically do small farmers deploy the funds that they borrow from you, and how prompt are they in terms of returning the money?
Right. So our engagement is at an ecosystem level, at a value chain level, Vivek, not at an individual farmer level. The model is not opening a branch and then let farmers walk in for their loan. That's not the model. The model is a B2B2C model, in which the middle B represents either a farmer collective, a FPO, or a agri enterprise, which deals with a large number of either smaller enterprises or farmers eventually. Right? That's our model. And between the two verticals, one is agri-finance and second one is agri-commerce, is where we have crossed the $1 billion mark in terms of the throughput. Our understanding is lending is meaningful to agriculture and farmers if it is not customized. It has to be customized, and it is a principle of any lending for that matter. Structuring the loan basis the cash flows associated with the activity is how any loan has to be structured. But given that the lending through the bank started as a crop loan, and given that the crop loan is a small loan given for the activity, what has resulted in is it is usually a bullet disbursement, bullet repayment kind of a structure.
What do you mean by bullet disbursement?
When we say bullet disbursement, the entire amount is credited into the bank account after the loan is given. And bullet repayment is where after the crop is harvested, you have to pay me the entire amount back. I'm not getting the KCC into the picture at this point in time while I'm explaining this. I'm explaining how the genesis of crop loan and
KCC would be the Kisan Credit Card.
Kisan Credit Card. Okay, sorry, old habits die harder. I'm still using the jargon. I'll get better at it, Vivek. So I'm not talking of the credit card kind of an approach to lending at this point in time. So what that would mean is you are putting the entire, when I said that, it is the entire amount of the loan being disbursed into the bank account or in cash to the farmer, is where you are transferring the discipline of keeping the cash aside and taking out a smaller bits and investing in the agriculture over a period for de-weeding, for applying pesticide and for applying fertilizers for the growth, and pay the labor, and eventually when the harvest happens, you are supposed to get the money back. Now these farmers also have other requirements for liquid cash. Now here is a cash that is already sitting, and I have a requirement for whatever emergency and things like that, with all good intentions. I'm not saying that they are not rational people and they fritter away money. Definitely not. I have seen them from close quarters. They run their lives very scientifically. But there are demands on that cash. And to meet that demand, if the cash is consumed, then there are only two options for them for the next step of either a de-weeding or a fertilizer. Borrow from somewhere and have that activity, or compromise in that activity. Both of which have a bearing on the actual economic outcome of the harvest. Right? This is all from the dimension of Vivek, that the crop has not failed for whatever reason, whether it is calamity or a hyper-local problem. We are assuming that the crop has not failed. Now, what happens if the crop fails? The activity has failed in between, but the money has already been given to the farmer and he is indebted to the entire amount. Right? So product design and product structuring, together with a good understanding of managing the risks or structuring the risks, in my view, are the two essential ingredients while working with farmers in farming. That is why our realization that market linkages are important also stems from the fact that the moment we get into market linkages, then you become a partner in the process, you become partner in the activity. You are an internal player in the value chain. There was a beautiful note that Calvert Foundation had come out in 2014 that helped us a lot in terms of designing our own thinking on how to engage with lending in agriculture. And that note clearly says, it is by Calvin Miller, that an internal player in the value chain has a better appreciation of how to engage and manage risk better than an external player in the value chain who is sitting on the fence and taking the collateral as a risk mitigant. So we are an internal player in the value chain. The moment you are an internal player in the value chain, then the outcome of the crop becomes as interesting to you as anyone else.
So how do you ensure the output, or that the money that you have advanced is not used for other purposes?
Our typical structure, Vivek, is for the purchase of seeds, inputs and fertilizers, we actually give a working capital term loan for about 3 months to a farmer producer organization to buy these inputs in bulk before the season and stock it in their input shop for their members to come and buy. There are three kinds of sales that happen: cash sales for non-members, cash sales for members who don't have credit history, and credit sales for people who they feel are comfortable. But that call whom to give on credit and whom not to give is a call that is taken by the FPO, but by their organization. Whenever the produce is harvested, it is the FPO which does the procurement again. In the ideal state, when the FPO can do everything, all FPOs don't do all these activities. Some FPOs say I will only sell inputs and I have nothing to do with output. Some FPOs would say I will just do output, I will not do anything with the input. So there are multiple combinations of the preferences of each of the FPOs. I'm giving you a typical example. If the FPO were to do all these activities, the ones that are procuring in the procurement have to do the quality assessment, and then those customers who have taken inputs on credit, their payment would be deducted from the payment that needs to be made from the harvest. So it becomes like a salary deduction, right? You have to pay the monthly salary. You have already taken an advance. You deduct it upfront and pay. Then they, for the second season, next season, will naturally come back to take the inputs. They are not investing from the money that they have got from the harvest, right? They are investing from now for the future activity. That cycle will go on. After that, the FPO can store and sell, do a little bit of primary processing in terms of taking out the sticks and stones, the foreign particles that they are called, and then sell to respective people in wholesale. The value addition that can come in later, if I can do a little bit of future thinking, is where the FPO becomes a processing space where they also get into secondary processing, not tertiary, secondary processing, and have the ability to supply different qualities and grades to different corporates who require them and start making the delta. All those are the opportunities that the FPO has so as to start paying dividends to their members at some point in time. And there are shining examples of few entities that have done it. Mulknoor Cooperative in Telangana is one shining example where they do that. Amul, of course, is a wonderful example. But
Sahyadri seems to be doing terrific.
Sahyadri guys are doing a fantastic job. They are an inspiration to many of us. They are doing a fantastic job. You are right. So there are some examples. Can we cross-pollinate these things over a period? That is why Samunnati's option to work with smaller entities is also from the dimension that these are malleable, ductile. You can actually make them adopt to newer practices and show what they can do to their members, and then become relevant to their members as collectives. That's the idea. And it is a journey, Vivek. It has been only 5 years since we started. Last 3 years for the sector have been great. I would certainly see next 5 years for farmer and sector. Maybe in 2025, if there is an opportunity to talk to you, I would be able to give example of how this has resulted into more money in the farmer's hand, tangibly. Today, it is an expectation.
Look forward to that. Look forward to that. Thank you, Anil, for joining us on Field Notes. And until we meet next week, goodbye and God bless.